Okay, so today I'm going to show you how to merge your code into an environment branch. So we're going to go through the process of creating your own feature branch, committing changes to that branch, and then requesting that that branch gets merged into an environment branch via a pull request, which will give another developer the opportunity to review your code. We're going to be using Bitbucket, but the process will be the same for any other repository systems, so GitHub, Azure DevOps, etc. So let's get started. We have a test repository here, and as you can see, there's just one branch in it, which is the main branch. It's a development branch. So if I click on the source here to see the source code, we'd be able to select any branches from here, and we can just see main in there. Now, for simplicity's sake, there's no code in this repository. It's just a README file and a git ignore file, but obviously in a active repository, you might have JavaScript files, CSS files, HTML, class files, etc. So we're going to make a simple change to the README file and then request that that gets merged into our main branch. So the golden rule is that you never make changes to an environment branch directly, so you wouldn't make a change to this main branch. You would create a branch off of that and then make your changes there, which would then get merged in. So let's go ahead and do that. If you hadn't already, you would click this clone button and then copy this and run it in your terminal, so your command line or git bash, so that you can clone the repository onto your machine. I've already done that, so I'm going to go ahead and open Visual Studio Code. And again, you could do this same process from Visual Studio itself. And this is the repository here. So again, just a git ignore file and a README file. And in the bottom left, it will tell you which branch you're on. So we're actually on the main branch at the moment. So what we can do is either create the branch now, or we can make our changes and then create the branch. So I'm going to add in a new line which says code change. And again, you can imagine that this change has been made to some kind of code file, like a JavaScript file. And if we click on our Changes tab here, we can now see that there's actually been a change to the README file. So if I go ahead and click on that, I can see that two new lines have been added, an empty line and a code change line. And that's in green to show that it's something that's been added. But if I similarly delete a line and press Ctrl S and go back to my working tree, we can actually see in red that something's been removed as well. So let's imagine that we've made our code changes and we actually want to go ahead and commit them now. Well, we're on our main branch, and remember that we're not going to commit code directly to an environment branch like a main branch. In a real project, you might have multiple environment branches. You could have a main branch for your live releases, and then you might have a development, a test, or even a pre-production branch for your other environments. But either way, you wouldn't commit to any of those branches directly. So what we need to do is create a new branch, and you can do this directly in Visual Studio or Visual Studio Code. So if I click on the branch down here, we can see an option to create new branch. So I'm going to call this feature/update README file, and I'll press enter. And we can now see that we've actually created this feature update README file locally. And our changes have also carried across to it. So we have our code change line in here, and we have the removed line indicated by this red arrow here. Now, if I return to Bitbucket and I click on branches, what we'll notice is the branch doesn't appear here yet because we haven't published it. So we can still only see the main branch. But if I return to Visual Studio Code and I commit those changes, so I'm going to put in a message here, updated README file text, and I'll click commit. And we can now see the option here to publish the branch, and that will actually publish the branch with this outgoing commit, which we just created. So I'll click on publish branch, and once that's synchronized, we will see the changes in Bitbucket. So if I go back to my browser and refresh this page, we'll actually see the feature branch here, update README file. And you can even see here there's a column with an option to create a pull request here. So if I go back into Visual Studio Code, we're now on our feature branch, and we can continue to make changes. So on a typical project, you might actually be making multiple commits a day. In fact, you should certainly commit a few times a day whenever you're leaving your PC, because it means that all of the changes have been pushed up to the cloud and that you wouldn't lose anything should you have some kind of issue with your local machine, like a corrupted hard drive. So let's make another change. Let's just add something here. More changes, and I'll press Control S and then commit some more changes. You would never have a commit message like this. You'd want it to be as descriptive as possible, but just for demonstration purposes, I'll commit that. And I'll click the Sync Changes button either there or down here at the bottom, which will actually show you there's one commit ready to be pushed. And if there was anything ready to pull from the origin branch, so from that remote branch, it would also show there. So I'll click that button, which will synchronize the changes. And now if I return to the browser and refresh this page, if I actually click into my branch now, feature update readme file, I'll be able to see a list of commits. So we can see that I've made 2 commits, my initial update readme file text and some more changes as well. When you make your pull request, all of your commits will be essentially merged together. So your pull request will contain all of those commits. And if I scroll down the page a bit, we can see exactly what changes I made. So we can notice that this code change and the deletion was from the first commit, and this was from the second one. If you want to look at that in more detail, you can actually click on a commit. So I could click on this second commit here, and it will show me only changes related to that commit. So either way, let's imagine that we've finished our changes now and we're ready for someone else to review this. We can see here from the branches page that our feature branch is 2 commits ahead of main, meaning there are 2 changes on our feature branch which are not on our main branch. This should always be the case, that your feature branches are ahead of your environment branches. You should never see that an environment branch is ahead of you, because that means there's changes on that branch which aren't on your branch. If that is the case, you could go into Visual Studio and you could click the synchronize button and it would pull changes down for you, or you could click these 3 dots up here and click pull, and it will pull any changes down. So we're ready for our code to be reviewed, so I'm going to go ahead and click create under the pull request column, and that's showing us that we are creating a pull request to merge our code from our source branch update readme file into our destination branch of main. The title and description will generate automatically based on your branch name and commit messages, but you could of course edit this. And usually you'll want to tick this box to delete the branch after the pull request is merged. This is to prevent a buildup of stale branches in your repository, but if there is some reason you want to keep the branch and you want to carry on working on it after the pull request is merged, you could of course not tick that box. So I'm going to go ahead and click create pull request. And we now have a pull request. So if I click on pull requests, we can see that there's one waiting here. There's no reviewers assigned to it, but you could of course add reviewers, and in fact you should set up rules on your branches that mean at least one reviewer should approve a pull request, other than the author of course, before it gets merged into the environment branch. So if we switch roles now and imagine I'm another developer and I'm not myself, I'm someone else that's reviewing this code, I'd come into the pull request and I'd read the title and the description. I might look at any attachments such as screenshots that have been attached, and I'd click on files changed and would start reviewing the code to understand what changes have been made to the code base. There's a handy box here to mark a file as viewed, so that if there's multiple file changes, which usually there will be, you can mark that to say that you've actually reviewed that file. So on a bigger project, you might have 20 files that have been changed there. That's a useful tool there, which only you can see. Once you've reviewed the changes, you can click approve if you're happy with everything. If not, you may have comments for the original developer. So let's imagine that we're not happy with this configuration change. I can click this plus icon there, and I can add a comment saying this line should not be removed. And if I click Start Review, the developer who originally made the pull request will now see this, and we can see that it's actually pending. The developer will be notified that there's some kind of change required to the original pull request. So if we switch roles again, and imagine I'm the original developer now, I can come in and I can look at this comment and I can either reply to it, or if there was a task created off of it, I could resolve it. In this case, I'm going to delete this comment, and we can imagine that we're completely happy with all of the changes instead. So I'm going to go ahead and click approve, And again, you should have rules on these branches that say an author cannot review their own pull request. It has to be another developer, but this is just for demonstration purposes. And once they've reviewed it, it will either merge in automatically if you've set it up to do so after any builds have run, if you have pipelines set up, or if not, you can go ahead and click the merge button. So as it stands, if I click on the branches here, we still have this feature branch and it's still 2 commits ahead of main. Nothing's been changed yet in terms of the code on the main branch. But as soon as I click this merge button, now everything's been reviewed and approved. We can enter a commit message. We can close the source branch afterwards, which again was deleting that branch to avoid stale branches. And we can choose our merge strategy. Merge commit is fine. What that means is it will amalgamate all of your commits into one. So if there were 20 commits on that feature branch, it will push everything as one commit into your environment branch. So I'm going to go ahead and click merge there. And we can see the merge is in progress. For bigger pull requests, this might take some time, but for this kind of small change, it will just take a few seconds. So if I go back onto my branches now, we can see that the feature branch is gone and we just have our main branch. And if I actually go into the main branch now, under source, we can actually see in the README file more changes, code change, and our line was deleted here. So the code changes have been pushed up to the main branch now. They've been made on your environment branch and you're ready to do a release. If I click on commits here, we can actually see the changes, the more changes, and the update README file text, and they were made from this branch. So we can actually see that we've got our main branch here, we've branched off of it, we've made a couple of commits, and then we've merged it back in here, which is this commit. So if I click on this commit here, we can see, as discussed before, that this has amalgamated the 2 commits from the feature branch into one and committed these changes directly into the main branch. And that's it. It's as simple as that. So just to revise, if we open Visual Studio Code, we make our changes, we click down here and we can create a new branch. We can call that whatever we like. When we've done that, we can commit our branch, which will push the origin branch, which means your remote branch, to the repository. When we go to the repository, we can then create our pull request. Someone will review the pull request or leave comments if there's changes to be made. And when that's done, it can be approved and merged into your main branch. And this means that someone has always reviewed your code. These pull requests are also an opportunity for you to talk to other developers and actually go through your code, talk about design patterns, why you've made certain changes, and also an important chance for knowledge share and collaboration to occur so that the other developers are able to also understand changes that are going on within the repository as you're working on it together. So hopefully that's been helpful. See you next time.